Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, I think I finally will mention something that you might have noticed in the last episode, but I don't think a majority of people have paid attention to. It was the fact that I was actually sick in the last episode. When I made the last podcast, I was coming down with something. And this podcast I'm making when I'm leaving that thing. I'm going to be done being sick soon. Otherwise, I don't really have that much housekeeping to do, other than maybe leave comments on ideas for future things to do for my Patreon reaction series. Although, if you're not a patron, I probably won't do it. With that out of the way, let's get right into the news. Now, the 3 foreign news stories are interesting because they all revolve around a similar topic, but not really the same, they're the same thing, but in different areas. So the first one is the PAN and PRD presidential candidates meet in the Forum Unity Coalition governments. Basically, a bunch of people from the PAN, and the PRD met and had this huge conference to basically denounce AMLO and basically try to regroup the Va por Mexico coalition. And the reason why this is interesting is because this is coming up right when Mexico is close to pushing for candidates in 2 states that will be running in June, I think is the election date. And that's going to be the last election before Mexico's upcoming presidential election. This is basically the last regrouping before they're able to do the big unity strike against Morena. And I'm going to leave more discussion about that in a future episode. Wink, wink. All I will say is there is something brewing, and we just have to wait and see how that plans out. Speaking of things panning out, it looks like something interesting is panning out in Venezuela. So, in order to gear up for the next presidential election, Nicolas Maduro has announced that he is making his own television show called With Maduro, although from the advertising it looks like Con Maduro Plus, which I guess is supposed to be a reference to all of the streaming services, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, etc. Now, I find this interesting for 2 reasons. One, we all know this is supposed to be a callback / reference and obvious parallel between him and Hugo Chavez, because Hugo Chavez also had a TV show called A lo Presidente. But it's interesting that he's starting this up because he actually did have a show previously called Contact with Maduro / Sundays with Maduro, but he canceled them in the lead up to the 2018 election. But he's restarting this show, which, again, with Maduro, it's basically just that, but again, in the lead up to the next presidential election, which very much indicates that Maduro is going to run in the upcoming elections. Now, some of you might be wondering, wait, how's this was this a thing in question? Yeah, it actually was. Because PSUV has actually been trying to get rid of Maduro for a while, because Maduro is no Chavez. He is not as popular as Hugo Chavez. And they've thought about replacing him in the last election, and for this lead up to this next election, one of the things, especially with the caveat for the Biden administration to look into this Venezuela stuff, they're basically trying to make, that's I think one of the agreements they're trying to get, have Maduro not run in the upcoming election. That might be one of the stipulations to be this proves that it's fair and free because Maduro can't run in it. Now, I don't know what this will really mean. I don't know if maybe this will be the indication that the Venezuelan opposition needs to actually manage to win, or if this is basically just going to be another slide into obvious victory with PSUV. But either way, that's going to be an interesting development when it happens. But one thing that is a very interesting development comes from Argentina, where Alberto Fernandez made a somewhat interesting, announcement. When I first saw it, my jaw dropped, but in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have had my jaw drop. Alberto Fernandez made the announcement that he will not seek re-election in the upcoming Argentinian election. Now, I'm sure there are some of you that might be hearing, who? So let me briefly explain who Alberto Fernandez is. Alberto Fernandez, obviously, is the current president of Argentina. He represents the Judicialist Party, also known as the Peronist Party. You may have heard Perón from the hit musical Evita, but he represents a faction called the Frente de Todos, also known as Everybody's Front, which is the left-wing faction of the Peronist movement. They were formed off of the Front for Victory, which was started by Nestor and Cristina Kirchner. Cristina Kirchner is also Alberto Fernandez's vice president, which was both a good and bad thing for Fernandez, because Cristina Kirchner is an incredibly popular politician. The problem was, she is infinitely more popular than him. So many people accused her of essentially puppeting through the Fernandez government, that she was essentially calling all the shots, and then she would eventually try to run for the presidency herself. Which is why they did this whole thing where she's no longer allowed to run for the upcoming election due to corruption scandals. You know, trumped up charges, similar to Lula, but it's like, technically there's something there, but it's like, is that something really worth anything? I don't really know. And from the looks of it, comparing her with a bunch of the other people in like Argentinian politics, not really. And due to the fact that Fernandez isn't really even seen as the leader in his own administration, Alberto Fernandez has been an incredibly unpopular politician. Now, he's done a decent amount of good, but unfortunately, people are just not interested in seeing what he plans to do for Argentina anymore. To the point where when they did presidential polling for this upcoming election, Alberto Fernandez has consistently polled single digits throughout the race, which is why his own party was contemplating running Cristina Fernandez in the first place. His party polls okay, Cristina Fernandez and other members of his party poll okay, it's literally just a him problem. Legitimately, it's not that surprising that he decided to drop out and not actually run for re-election. But it's really interesting because that opens the door for his coalition to run literally anybody else. And unfortunately, since none of them are Cristina Fernandez Kirchner, the party doesn't look like it's going to win in the upcoming election. Okay, so next story, I'm finally going to talk about Twitter and Elon Musk. And the only reason I'm talking about it is because Elon Musk has literally ruined Twitter. Like, literally, it's not even at the point of debate anymore. It is literally going to be completely obvious that he's ruined Twitter. The reason being is that on 420, Elon Musk made the stunning revelation that he was actually going to remove people's check marks for not paying for them. Now, the thing is, he didn't remove everybody's blue checks. He, in fact, kept a lot of people on the blue check mark. Like, literally, he openly admitted that he's just flat out paying for certain celebrities to keep their blue check marks, which is, like, obviously a huge contradiction, but it's like, who cares? But the biggest problem as to why this is a huge issue is that now accounts that were used to be verified now are completely unverified and are considered just random crowd in the field. And anybody who does have verification is literally just paying for it. They are paying for a higher privilege on a website, and they are now on the level that used to literally go to official accounts, and that's led to literally a lot of problems, as very quickly a lot of people, like, with every single freaking thing that comes from this Twitter thing, literally almost immediately people exploit it. When Elon Musk announced, we're going to have people pay for verifications. Literally the next day, people bought blue check marks to fake being official accounts. Then, for some reason, he decided to do this stupid thing like, oh, no. You can, if you pay for Twitter Blue /or you were already a verified Twitter account, now you both have blue marks. It's like, what? But if you click the blue check mark, now you'll see why the person's verified. It's like, that makes no sense. And then he's like, now we'll introduce all these other different types of verifications. Oh, so like these accounts that are official accounts, they don't have to pay? It's like, oh no, they do have to pay, but they just get a different color now. Like, what? And of course, every step of the way, there's been a lot of problems, because I've seen a ton of people who've said that they have literally never paid for Twitter Blue, never paid for verification, never did any of the stuff that you're supposed to do to get a Twitter blue check mark, but they still have a blue check mark, which is because Elon Musk is literally just saying, he's just giving them the blue check mark, because giving someone a blue check mark is not a difficult task. Like, the way Elon has been trying to pretend that this, like, this is, like, a really hard task, like, and we need to, like, take this money. It's like, dude, Twitter's been literally giving out blue check marks for free this entire time. This was a very simple process. You're the one who made it complicated. So now we have all of these massive celebrities that just don't have their verifications, which now means anybody can just pretend to be them, which has happened. But also, many people pointed out this very big one, official Twitter accounts that were of state and local governments that had gotten verification, they now no longer have verification, and that was the only reason people trusted them. Like, if your city had a Twitter account and there was a natural disaster, they could post it, you would see the verification, and you'd go, okay, so my city is telling me that I need to evacuate this area, but now that city doesn't have that verification, so they can't do it anymore. Especially since the way that this verification system now works is now they're getting buried. Now accounts that do not have verification, they're literally buried. Accounts that are verified are literally getting their own segments on Twitter. Like, you go to the notifications thing and it's like, you can see you can see notifications from people who are normal, or you can see verifications for people who are verified. They get their own special section. And the thing is, it was like, not all of his ideas were stupid. Like, the whole thing where he was like, we're going to have all these different types of colors for verification badges, and they'll all mean different things. It's like, that's not necessarily a bad idea. But even then, it's like, he is messing it up. Like, I'm looking at my follower feed right now. I follow, like, a ton of members of Congress on Twitter, and only some of them have a gray verification badge that says they are a member of the government. Bernie, AOC, Cory Bush, John Fetterman, but for some reason, Rashida Tlaib doesn't have one. Ro Khanna doesn't have one. Peter Welch doesn't have one. And it's not even consistent, because I'm not following all of their official government. Like, if this was, like, their official government-sanctioned accounts have, like, the gray verification badge, that's one thing. But I follow Bernie's both official Senate page and his actual, like, normal page, and both have a gray verification badge. And there are some people that I follow only their official government page, and they don't have a gray verification badge at all. But of course, one of the biggest things that has led to, that is a huge problem, that I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about, is very simple. One thing Elon Musk said that he was doing all this to try and prevent is very clearly going to be caused by this issue. One of the big things that he's been trying to tout with this whole revamp of Twitter was that, at the very least, we'll be able to stop, like, scams. When in fact, no, scams are very much prevalent on Twitter. Still, you still get spam DMs telling you to, like, join crypto groups and stuff. And you've literally increased the ability to scam people when you're creating a way for people to fake being a legitimate account. Let's just play devil's advocate for the Musk fans, even though they're completely wrong, and say, like, but you could pay $8 for an account. That's not the point. The point is, this is a system that wasn't supposed to have a financial benefit. This was a system that was not built for you to pay to get into it. This was a verification system. The point of the blue checkmark was to verify if a person was a real person or not. The purpose of the verification system was to prevent people from pretending to be celebrities and prominent people when they weren't. And the reason why it's taken me so long to talk about this is because it finally dawned on me what this is. What Elon Musk is doing to Twitter is literally the quintessential definition of capitalism. Every time there's deregulation, every time you leave it up to the markets, every time, you know what happens? At first, it looks like you're doing good. At first, Elon Musk is thinking, okay, so advertisers are leaving Twitter. So the solution is that I need to get people on Twitter to pay for a service. So he has Twitter users pay for a system. And in the short term, Elon Musk sees money go up. Me see money go up. And he's ecstatic because he get more money in the short term. But I guarantee you, in the long term, the money is just going down. He just sees the short amount of times where it goes up. So yeah, at one point or another, I'm probably going to just remove my Twitter handle from the ability, like from my description and from all this stuff, because Twitter is on its way out, essentially. Like, it really is. And if Twitter implodes tomorrow, I'm not making another page. I'm not going to Mastodon or anything like that, because I'm not going to get sucked into another social media addiction. I've said this on my Twitter multiple times as Twitter has imploded. If you guys don't know how to find me at this point, that's a you problem. If you exclusively follow me on Twitter, and while I'm at it, I'll just say, if you exclusively subscribe to me on YouTube, if you exclusively follow me on Twitter, if you exclusively are in my server, but then don't do anything, I don't like you. I legitimately hate you. And I don't care if this leads to people unsubbing because they're like, oh, I saw this video and then you said you hated me because I didn't watch your video, so I'm gonna unsub. Okay, I don't care, leave. Same with you people on Twitter that are like, oh, well, I saw your tweet where you said that you don't like your followers, so I'm gonna unfollow you. I don't care. I don't know who you are. You mean nothing to me. You staying and you leaving means absolutely nothing. So anyways, on to the next story. 3 St. Louis residents indicted on charges of illegally pushing pro-Russian propaganda. Now, this is a story that has been apparently this new boogeyman on the internet because the African People's Socialist Party, I think I've talked about them before, they've been getting into some hot water with the FBI and such. Especially their chairman, Omali Yeshitela, and members Joanne Hess and Jesse Neville, apparently, according to this alleged FBI CIA indictment, that it says that those 3 were apparently acting as illegal agents of the Russian government without notifying the U.S. Attorney General. They each face up to 10 years in prison for that charge. They also face up to 5 years in prison for conspiring to have U.S. citizens act as illegal agents. From what this story says, apparently a Russian national agent named Alexander Vitrikov Ionov founded something called the Anti-Globalization Movement of Russia, which is apparently like part of the Russian government, and it pushes pro-Russian propaganda across the world. And one of the people that they talked to was Yeshitela and the members of the Uhuru movement, which is also what they call themselves. And they've apparently been inciting certain pro-Russian talking points in the US, especially, and I'm going to assume exclusively, focusing on the war in Ukraine. Now, all of this stuff going on, I don't necessarily know what to make of it. Because I'm seeing a lot of people, like, apparently this has become such a big deal, apparently. But, like, from what it seems, like, basically from no angle, in my viewpoint, does it make that much sense. For starters, like, this is like some random far left movement in like really small areas that has very little influence. So on one end, I don't see them being like the big boogeyman that the evil Biden administration is trying to silence, because they don't really seem to be that big of a threat. Like, if they were a big thing, then maybe, but they're not a big threat. So I don't really understand why the Biden administration would make all this big deal over nothing for this party. Like, if it was like the big party, like the Black Panther Party, then that'd be one thing. But this party is relatively small, so I don't really understand why they would be a good boogeyman. But then on the other hand, this party is incredibly small, so why would Russia want to use this party to spread its propaganda? But I guess the whole point of like a government propaganda scheme is that you're supposed to go to literally almost every area in the nation, try and disseminate it, and do it through various ways. And then it also is like, but then wait, they're like actual Russian assets that like very much spread like anti-Ukrainian and pro-Russian propaganda in the United States about the Ukraine war. So why are those guys walking free, but the Uhuru movement is apparently being sentenced to 10 years in jail? I don't want to name names, but you can probably piece together certain ideas in your head. But this is where I'm starting to think, okay, so what I'm thinking is they just screwed up. Because I think these other names, because a lot of these names were like news people who worked for Russian news agencies, they have to file under the idea of like being federal agents of the Russian government. So they're in the clear because they have it on paper that they are Russian officials. But as the story says, the Uhuru movement, they don't. So maybe the Uhuru movement literally did just fuck up in a major way. And we also see people who don't have any like affiliation with the Russian government forever that do express very similar viewpoints that also don't get sentenced. So it's like if this was coming from somebody who I knew for a fact was not a Russian asset, then maybe it'd be one thing. But that's why I'm essentially just leaving this in the air. I'm only reporting it just because I want people to look further into it and then hopefully give me more information on what's going on. Speaking of things that have updates, this is an update. There's a settlement between Dominion and Fox News. Fox News now has to pay them, or has already paid them, $787.5 million. Legitimately, sad day. Sad day. Like, literally, all this money does is this is just lining Dominion's pockets. The thing about most settlement cases is settlements are literally cases where one or both parties literally just want the case to be over, and then they both get to claim some sort of win. Like, in this case, Fox News can say, like, they won the case because nothing happened, or they probably won't say anything at all because there's really no need to. If they were arrested, then they'd have to say it, but they don't have to. And Dominion just gets a lot of money. Legitimately, Dominion should have just taken down Fox News. They legitimately should have just taken down Fox News. That would have been a good closing end to the Fox News story. It finally end that chapter of American history of Fox News being there. But we ain't gonna see that. Speaking of things we're not gonna see a far-right person be consistent today, because apparently one very prominent right-wing official, Ali Alexander, is getting in trouble for things that the far right has allegedly hated. I'm not going to say what it is because you probably know what it is at this point, but I will say it is very interesting that it's always the far right that is caught for all these problems and never the drag queens. Now, I know the whole thing about like the far right pretending that they care about kids and then they don't, and that the far right legitimately just doesn't care. Like, they know they don't care, but they're just going to say they care because they want to say that they care. The only thing I will also say is that this is apparently leading into a lot of drama within the like far right, because a lot of far right people very much associated with Ali Alexander, and then they're getting into a fight over the fact that one of the people who was bringing this stuff to attention about Ali Alexander also has very interesting problems in regards to these things, but he came at it from a different point of view. So now we're getting people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Milo, Nick Fuentes, and Ali Alexander fighting each other, and it's only interesting to watch as background noise. Speaking of things to watch as background noise, Larry Elder has announced a 2024 White House bid. All that's interesting about him is the fact that he couldn't even get on Wikipedia's freaking major candidate thing. It's weird that Larry Elder doesn't get to be on there, but Vivek Ramsey is. Anyways, let's move on to the main topic of this video. Yes, that title is not like some weird thing that you're seeing. The title is legitimately what it says. The left has a right-wing infiltration problem. It's been a problem for a long time, and I'm kind of sick and tired of people not seeing it. I don't blame people at first for not being able to see it, but at this point in the year 2023, it really is just like staring you right in the face, and I can't believe that there are people who legitimately don't believe it, which in fact leads me to remember, oh yeah, they probably do know and believe that this is a thing, but they're not going to say anything because they usually benefit from this. It's literally gotten to the point where we have people who are literally fascists who pretend that they're hardcore leftists. And if you don't believe me at this point, I would highly encourage you to stick with me till the end, because I think after I do some explaining, you might see where I'm coming from. Now, as always, This is mostly going to revolve around like the internet left, or the left in the wake of the internet. But I should say that this is an issue that we've seen for a long time, where we've had people who are right-wing who either run left-wing or whatever, to the point we actually have a political term for it. It's called redwashing. It's where right-wingers literally pretend that they are to the left on it, like either on specific issues or just flat out pretend that they are left-wing. It can be something as small as rhetoric to something as big as literally just saying that there's something that they're not. An example, a hard right party will usually try to mimic rhetoric of left-wingers by talking about like the people and the elite and concentration of wealth and whatever. One of the furthest right presidential candidates I can think of, George Wallace, literally technically did some red washing. He would go to specific areas of the country where his like far right like Dixiecrat message wouldn't work, and then he would campaign on literally something completely different. The America First movement, at least the right-wing elements of it, had to say left-wing sounding stuff in order to get people to join in the coalition. All of a sudden, they were decrying imperialism, even though literally not that long ago they were probably helping literally the American empire grow. But let's again try to refocus our energy to the more modern, online type politics movement, because as much as people really hate to admit it, this is sort of what our politics is now. Online figures and online stuff is very important to politics. And believe it or not, there's actually a pretty clear line that you can see. Gamergate. Yes, Gamergate is still relevant. I legitimately regret me saying that I would not make a video on Gamergate because it is literally so fucking important to understand US politics right now. I know, it is really weird to say. Like, there are literally elements of it that I didn't even get until, like, really recently. Like, legitimately, I didn't know until recently that Milo Yiannopoulos, the guy who I literally just mentioned during the Ali Alexander story, who was a very prevalent political figure in like 2017. I legitimately didn't even know that he was part of Gamergate. Now he's literally one of the top people in the circle of a prominent member of Congress and is having lunch with freaking Nick Fuentes and Donald Trump. Now, does that mean I'm going to go back on it and actually make a video on Gamergate? No, but you will see something in the future, and in this video, you're going to get a little bit of inklings as to what I'm talking about, but we'll go about that and we'll move away from that right now and talk a little bit about where, like, how did we even get to this point to begin with? And we have to start all the way back to something you may remember. I've talked about it before, but pretty prevalent again. And it's really hard to believe that these people somehow became prevalent in US politics. The skeptic community. The skeptic community was a group of atheist center-left YouTubers who were debunking Christian conservatives. You know, The Amazing Atheist, Cult of Dusty, Mr. Repsion, Dark Matter 2525, Jacqueline Glenn. But by the 2010s, the subject was beaten to death, so they wanted to move on. The subject they wanted to move on to talk about was Islam, but when they tried to, a group of people tried to jump in and be critical of what they were doing, they were given the handle Social Justice Warriors, or SJWs. But the SJWs and the skeptics, this wasn't the first time that they came at odds with each other. This is going to be a little more in-depth, but this is really something incredibly freaking stupid. Again, when I tell you this, you're going to be like, wait, this somehow leads to Kanye West getting a gay man who's pretending he's not gay to be his campaign manager or something. Yes, I'm serious. Let me explain what the situation is first. Okay, so there was a prominent YouTube skeptic female named the Skepchick. She went to this, like, conference of atheist people, and then she said something about how, she's talking about, like misogyny in the atheist movement, because it was mostly led by a bunch of, like, white guys. So she was like, I'm concerned that this movement might be open to misogyny. Then, after having this conference, she then goes to, like, get a couple of drinks at a bar. Then, she goes back to the elevator of the hotel to get back to her room. But while in there, a guy comes in to the elevator asks her if she wants to go with him back to his room. She says no, and then he leaves. The Skep chick then decides to make a YouTube video explaining the situation, and she explains in a lot of detail, like, this was kind of like this really weird thing that happened to me, especially after I gave this whole speech decrying misogyny in the skeptic community. Now, a lot of you might not even understand what's the issue with this situation, so let me explain it like this. She's an intoxicated woman in an enclosed area with a stranger who then offers sex. Sure, in retrospect, we know nothing bad happens, but in that moment, she had no clue if that guy would have accepted no as an answer. What if he was eyeing her up during the bar and then slipped something in her drink, and then this would be right around the time where effects would kick in? And again, this comes after she was bringing up how many people don't really consider women in the skeptic community and treat them as lesser than them. And the thing is, it could have been left at that, and then nobody would have cared. Like, people might have seen that video and been like, yeah, that guy was kind of weird, and then thought nothing of it. But then Richard Dawkins got involved in the controversy and was saying how she was overreacting and how her blight was nothing compared to what women who are under Islam and what women under Christianity have to go through. And he was making some sort of claim like that she was trying to say that what she went through was worse than what they would go through, which she never did. And that was a common thing that was used against SJWs, where people would make comments that they literally never made. The most common one I can think of is people would go up to people who are like SJWs or whatever, and they say, oh, so you think a poor disabled white guy has more privilege than an able-bodied black woman? Which, no. Literally no. Have you never heard of the term intersectionality? Of course you haven't. But that was one of the instigating things that made the skeptic community want to crap on social justice warriors. But as the name Gamergate suggests, they weren't the only people who got involved, even though there was overlap between the skeptic community and gamers. And despite the fact that the gaming community and the geek and nerd community is very far away from normal society, and the whole point of social justice warriors, where people were trying to expose how quote-unquote normal society was treating the lesser people to an extent, people who are disabled, people who are gay, people who are LGBTQ, people who are not white, show how normal society treats them like garbage. And again, geeks and nerds are far from what is considered normal society. They still have a massive problem in regards to sexism. It was always so confusing to me to see, why are all these nerds so, sexist and stuff? Like freaking The Big Bang Theory. One of the whole points of The Big Bang Theory is that a lot of the four main characters, they literally treat women like shit. And it's only after, Penny, Bernadette, and Amy get involved in their lives that they realize, maybe women are actually, people. Bazinga. And for the gamer sphere, the biggest way they tried to do things was that they wanted to talk about how a lot of media has a lot of very sexist, misogynist, racist, homophobic type storytelling, and that would involve changing a lot of the stories and how games and movies and comics would be run for the future, and geeks and gamers didn't want that. Not the YouTube channel, but yes, the YouTube channel. So the skeptics and the nerds united to try and defeat the evil SJWs. However, unbeknownst to them, there was a third group that entered as an ally. Conservatives. People who were supposedly the brunt of the skeptics, all of a sudden were now hand in hand with them. Many new skeptic channels were being formed to exclusively talk about SJWs, Sargon being the most prominent example. And some conservatives would even go so far as to copy the skeptic community's type of content, whether it be the PNG, JPEG YouTubers like Bearing with the animal persona that does the crossed arms, or someone like Hunter Avalon who would copy Amazing Atheist style videos, but would literally be this diehard Christian. Literally, that was how it was how weird it was. The community that was supposed to we're the anti-religious people are now just openly allowing religious conservatives to enter their movement. Alongside that, a lot of the anti-SJW left started becoming buddy-buddy with right-wingers, usually based on the superficial BS that makes no sense in retrospect. Look, the right wing hates SJWs. We do too. Ergo, we and conservatives are in agreement. Like, we had literally some people who were in the skeptic community who just openly aligned with fascists. Like, for example, the Drunken Peasants, they had this prominent creator, JF. Like, he was like a person that they basically gave a huge platform for. And they were like, oh yeah, we're going to debunk all the Christian conservatives together. And then the dude just flat out starts talking about how he thinks that due to evolution, he thinks that all the races are different creatures. Starts talking about like brain maps and like, look, I'm just saying, some people's foreheads are big and some are small. Just saying. And then there's others that literally would just say, this is a really good journalist, blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that really good journalist was in fact a fascist. That's when I started dipping out of the community. When it's starting to get hard to tell when the right-wingers end and the left-wingers begin, that's kind of when it's your cue to get out. And ignore the fact that literally all of the anti-SJW right-wingers were basically just saying, look, we just hate progressives. Like, that is literally what they were saying. Sure, they would say SJW just to get people to click on them, but it was pretty obvious that they were just like, no, we just hate, like, liberals and progressives. Even though, again, a lot of skeptics claim to be liberals and progressives. And while a lot of anti-SJW leftists, quote-unquote, started becoming friends with and aligning themselves with the right, they would start arguing about the left and against the left, while not even touching the right. And some would even start making the shift themselves to the right. And since the internet was so anti-establishment and anti-idpol SJW, that meant they gravitated towards two candidacies, Trump and Bernie, both being seen as populist anti-SJW candidates. Now, in retrospect, you completely understand why Trump is the anti-SJW candidate, but what makes Bernie that? Simply put, he was an old white guy who ran on class issues, despite the fact that he was not at all hostile to feminism or IDPOL or whatever. For some reason, anti-SJWs loved Bernie, particularly the ones who did not make a hard right shift. You know, the ones that were still technically left-wing and center-left. One of the biggest ways that they used this is like they would look at Bernie's record and see, like, Bernie supported women for a long time. Bernie supported gay rights for a long time. But then the media would push this narrative that Bernie was bad on these issues. Like, he was, as an old white guy, he couldn't understand women's issues. He couldn't understand black issues. He couldn't understand gay issues. When in fact, many people looked at his record and said, he understands these issues very much so, but the media is still treating him as if he's this bad person. Like, apparently one thing that was brought up was the fact that Bernie wrote like a letter where he talked about how there were some women who wanted to like get chained up and slapped by their man, and they're like, the media was saying like, this is proof that Bernie's an evil misogynist for thinking that women do this. But then a lot of skeptics would go, I mean, I know a lot of freaks out there that do like that. Another example came from where BLM protesters disrupted a Bernie rally, and people were like, see, this is proof that Bernie's the anti-SJW candidate. The SJWs are disrupting his candidacy. And due to this fact, many anti-SJWs just flat out supported Trump come the general. Like Sargon, for like a while, literally said that was the only reason he supported Trump, because he made the SJWs mad. And this birthed something that continues to be a problem today. The anti-SJW left, the anti-identity politics left, the anti-culture war left, the anti-woke left, class reductionists, whatever you want to call them. Basically, people who identify as leftists that either ignore or openly hostile to social issues. They saw gay marriage be solved via Obergefell and went, welp, we won. No more issues to talk about. What's that? HB2 is still a thing? Pfft, who cares? Gay issues are solved. What's that? You want to codify them into, like, law and not have to rely on this, like, Supreme Court case that could easily be overturned at any point? No, you don't understand. The issue's solved. We won. Gay people can get married now. Granted, they still have all these other things they can't do, but they see anything further that you want to fight for as a detriment. fighting for trans and non-binary rights is now seen as a detriment. But fighting for gay rights in the past, that was good. Fighting for racial liberation, that's bad. But when we were just fighting for civil rights, that was good. I think I said the exact same thing in the Anna-Kasparian video. The activism of yesteryear is good, but the activism of the current year is bad. That is how like liberal progressive types always view it. Now they would claim like, no, we love these issues, but this would be a problem for us to try and get right-wingers to join us. We need to focus on class issues so that we can get right-wingers to align with us and vote for us and whatever to win people over. They said things like, we need to unite the populist left with the populist right to take down the establishment, or terms like libertarian right and libertarian left. Now, I've made a video as to why this is stupid, but the TLDR is these two things agree on problems, not solutions, and two, nobody actually knows what the terms populist left or libertarian left mean. Like, populist left ranges from Christian Democrat to full-blown neo-Nazi. Kyle Kalinske is the biggest example as to this stupidity. He somehow convinced a lot of people that populist right somehow means Donald Trump, but also not Donald Trump, but also Josh Hawley, but also not Josh Hawley, but also leftists who are anti-gay marriage, but also libertarians, but also definitely not Hitler, even though his movement was literally this nationalist, populist type strategy, that no right-wing populism there. And then another way was somehow the term libertarian left was construed as libertarian. Like, libertarian left somehow translates to libertarian party, even though, no, they're libertarian right. I blame the political compass on that one, because they somehow turned the term libertarian to mean more than just libertarian in the American sense. Now, I know you'll say, like, but libertarian has not necessarily been a term that meant libertarian right-wing, but it's like, but in the modern day it is. Using words' original definitions in the modern day really doesn't mean anything when a majority of people use it in a certain way. This particular type of politics is very popular and common with cis-white upper-middle-class progressive liberal types in blue states. But there is a divide depending on the sex of the person. If they are a guy, they will more than likely lump feminism in there. Women will... They might not necessarily align all the feminism in there, but they will align third-wave feminism. Like, that's a big thing, especially now. Like, I still see this. Sometimes I'll see people, like, tweet, like, I don't like third-wave feminism, but it's like, how do you hate third-wave feminism? Because third-wave feminism literally involves, like, trans rights and stuff. It understands that the gender binary is not, like, 1 to 2. Second-wave feminism is literally just like, you have pussy, that means you have rights. Things get worse when the alt-right appeared. Let me explain. Almost immediately after Charlottesville, social media platforms had to overcorrect due to their complicity with their rise, rather than platforming people who were either slightly to the right to full-blown Nazis. Now they would platform people who were like social democratic to full-blown communist in an effort to try and de-radicalize them from the far right. And you might say, that's a good thing, yes? Yeah, that sounds good, right? But here's the issue. Think about it. They're now sending these far-right accounts to now go and watch left-wing creators. While yes, the left-wing creators can pull them closer to their ideology, what about all these massive influx of right-wing viewers going to left-wing channels? There's a lot more of them. Can they not pull the left-wing creator to the right? Hypothetically, yes. Let me give you an example. A guy starts a YouTube channel named Dormitory Oratory. He dabbles in videos relating to social and political commentary. He's a progressive social democrat who either entered politics because of or was greatly inspired by Bernie Sanders' presidential run. He starts posting stuff around like 2017, 2018. Let's just say, yeah, then. You know, he talks about the news, maybe he dabbles in other types of content like informative stuff. But one frequent thing he does is that he criticizes Democrats For all the right reasons, abandoning the working class, rigging the nomination against Bernie, acting as though empty Idipol is worth his support. Yeah, all the correct reasons, but he does still criticize Democrats, and a lot. While yes, he mostly stays within a left of center, maybe some people who are further left watch him and are like, hey, this guy's like kind of cool. But soon, he starts noticing a couple of people who are right-wing start commenting on his videos. They say stuff like, even though I voted for conservatives my whole life, I think you're right on the money. And his channel starts growing even more so than it has. And Dormitory Oratory is happy. His message is starting to get out to people beyond his inner circle. He's ecstatic. He thinks, like, yes, I'm doing it. I'm pulling people from the right to the left. Maybe when Bernie Sanders runs inevitably again, I might do it. I might be able to pull them to vote for Bernie. Then Dormitory Oratory starts to get a little interested in how his videos are doing, so he looks at his analytics. He notices 2 videos posted on the same day. One video is heavily critical of Democrats. One is pretty critical to Republicans. He notices that the one criticizing Democrats does really, really well, but the one where he criticizes Republicans doesn't do really well. So he notices, when I criticize Democrats, people gravitate to it more. So he thinks, oh, so people must really like my criticisms of Democrats. I must be really good at poignantly, like, criticizing Democrats, and I guess my criticisms of Republicans don't really work so well. So he starts focusing more attention to criticizing Democrats. Maybe when he realizes, oh crap, I've talked about like all the like right-wing Democrats, what do I do? Maybe I'll just air some like small grievances I have with like some of the few left-wing members of Congress. Or maybe he starts focusing on issues that he knows right-wingers would probably agree with him on, even if they're not for the same reasons. Russiagate, Epstein, Ukraine, Assange, and he sees those videos that appeal to right-wingers do well. He later learns if he posts certain like people in the thumbnails, like AOC or Bernie, he gets a lot more views than he did before. His Patreon, his super chats, his subscriber count, they all start going up like crazy. So then, Dormitory Oratory decides to shift their content. All of a sudden, videos on Republicans go away, unless it's some form of praise. This Republican introduced a bill to pull the troops out of Syria. This red state voted for marijuana legalization. Maybe they hyper-focus hard on the criticisms of the Squad and Bernie. Suddenly, now Bernie and AOC are just like the rest of the Democrats, all while staying silent or praising Republicans. Maybe issues that they used to talk about passionately, like Medicare for all or LGBTQ rights, start disappearing, and now they talk a lot more about issues that appeal to right-wingers. Maybe now he expresses views that he never would have had before, or started ramping them up at certain times. Maybe he decides to talk about the 2004 problems with the Ohio voting machines right around the time that Republicans are spreading this unfounded conspiracy that an election was rigged by Venezuelan voting machines. Maybe they start openly criticizing one particular drug company when they are tasked with a vaccination. Maybe they mention one particular Democratic donor, and they mention one particular foreign ally that we need to cut aid from. At what point is that any different from a right-wing channel? Now here's the thing. While that story technically wasn't true, there is no YouTube channel called Dormitory Oratory. What I have said is based on a true story, and not just a true story, many true stories. The story I just said is the story of Jimmy Dore. It's the story of Tulsi Gabbard. It's the story of Roseanne Barr. It's the story of Tim Canova, Bruce Stanley, David Rold, Nick Branna, Nico House, Fiorella Isabel, Max Blumenthal, Kayla Maupin, Jackson Hinkle, Revolutionary Blackout Network, George Galloway, Sargon, Shoe on Head, Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi, Dave Rubin, Candace Owens, H.A. Goodman, Cassandra Fairbanks, Tim Poole, David DePape, and like I said, this is just like in the internet age. This has been going on for a long time. Charles Coughlin, Lyndon LaRouche, William Randolph Hearst, Ernest Lundin, Trotskyists that turned into neocons. But these guys are not all comparable. X person says they're left wing. That's the same thing the anti-SJW said. But like them, if you're spending all of your time shitting on the left and you're giving coverage to right-wingers, from giving them credit when it's due to not giving them any coverage whatsoever, legitimately, what is the difference between you and a right-wing channel? Especially when you word it in a particular way. We'll get into it in a second here, but I'm just going to say this, just so people can't take me out of context, even though people will take me out of context. So you're against working with people you disagree with? No. But I'm against agreeing with the right's terms and working with them on their terms and what they want. You're against trying to win people over? No. I'm against you being won over to them. This is what's happening. That's what's happening. You're not winning them over. You're going to them. The point of you going over to them was so you could bring them back over here. But what is happening is you're going to them and you're staying there. You're against criticizing Democrats. Bitch, have you seen my channel? I'm not against attacking Democrats. I'm against bashing leftists and helping the right. What you're doing is benefiting the right. You're not benefiting the left at all. You do hero worship. No. I am against the suicidal tendencies of the left, destroying all the progress we have made at this point. We do not have any more time to, start over and do again. We literally have no time. This is the infrastructure we have built. We have built this infrastructure for a long time. There's nothing we can do anymore that, aside from working within the infrastructure we have currently built. It's not my fault that you spent all this time building this infrastructure, and now you're like, nope, tear it down. I don't want to do it no more. If you wanted a different infrastructure, why weren't you building it up to this point? Like the Revolutionary Blackout Network, they're like, we've started these 5 chapters across the United States. It's like, why didn't you do this 5 years ago? But it wasn't until the lead up to the 2020 election, so 2019, that it became noticeable. Especially as soon as the lockdown happened. COVID literally broke a lot of people. People have fucking changed. Things were already shifting, but the second the pandemic began, things went like this. Something that was supposed to take 5 years to happen, all of a sudden, it became a thing that happened overnight. And when I say COVID changed people, I mean literally, people literally went into the COVID pandemic having one set of political views, and then came out having completely different views. Penn Jillette, literally one of the most diehard libertarians, is now a Joe Biden supporting liberal. The biggest thing that broke the left came from one thing: vaccines. Did they fall for the anti-vax conspiracies, / already believed in anti-vax conspiracy theories but didn't tell anybody, or did they remain sane? And unfortunately, there was a subsection of the left that for many reasons bought into it and formed a very tight-knit relationship with anti-vax righties, basically becoming the anti-SJW movement all over again. The seeds were started very early on. One of the many things that these guys hitched themselves was the freaking Jesse Ventura 2020 thing. Yeah, remember, there were some people who were legitimately trying to draft Jesse Ventura to run for president, and they somehow infiltrated the Green Party and infiltrated many other aspects of, the stupid, brain-dead, dumb left crowd. And very early on in the COVID pandemic, I guess, right before the COVID pandemic happened, he was like, well, would you be interested in having me run with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with my vice president? And guess what? Now, we have a lot of people who not only take Robert F. Kennedy seriously for some reason, but now they take him so seriously that they actually want and are rooting for him to be president of the United States in 2024. mostly as a reaction to people who were trying to push Marianne Williamson to run for president. COVID literally broke people's brains so much that a lot of the people on the left don't even believe in climate change anymore. I'm not kidding. Jimmy Dore ran a segment where he talked crap about Greta Thunberg, and a 2020 Green Party presidential candidate literally said that he doesn't believe in climate change anymore because COVID opened his eyes. Now I see that my eyes are opened. I see now that global warming is actually a globalist plot run by Zionists. It's like, and also I should mention, of course it was like levied really hard with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a huge part of like conspiracies and like aligning with the right. The second big issue that broke people's brains was Ukraine, with one section of the left unironically supporting Russia. And when I say like unironically supporting Russia, I don't mean like, oh, they are like opposing the war. No, they're literally just supporting Putin. Similar to how in the 30s and 40s, the Communist Party of the United States started publishing some unironically pro-German pieces in their paper during World War II, versus Norman Thomas actually being anti-World War II on principles. Thankfully, it has led to a way to easily tell if they are a real lefty or not. If you see any account that says X right-winger is out-lefting the squad on Ukraine, that is your cue to get the fuck out. Because that is literally a factually wrong statement, especially with the people they keep trying to say are out-lefting the squad. Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie. For some reason, these guys choose literally the furthest right members of Congress to make this claim. Very obvious that they're fascists if they're saying these far-right members of Congress are out-lefting the squad on anything. But for people who have brains the size of peanuts, let me explain. You don't have to be left-wing to oppose a war, because opposition to a war is not an inherently left or right issue. In fact, there are many cases where you could argue being pro-war is the left-wing position. I mean, let's just say, hypothetically, when Lenin was leading the Russian Revolution and you were saying how the war would be a bad idea, technically, you would be a right-winger on that issue. That would be the right-wing position to have on this issue, because the leftists, the communists, are literally supporting the war. They are fighting the war. Here's some other historical examples. Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford opposed World War II. It would be completely brain dead to say that they were left-wing on the issue. One of the granddads of modern conservatism, Robert Taft, was anti-war. Would be absolutely brain dead to call him left-wing on the issue. The Constitution Party is anti-war, and they were the party that the far-right nutbags went to before the GOP just admitted, yeah, we don't care if you're a far-right nutbag. And Ron Paul opposed the Iraq War, and he is literally the furthest right congressman from the 1937 to 2002 period. Yeah, remind you, that is a list that includes literal fascists. Those people opposed the wars because they wanted to cut government spending or they supported the people the US would have fought. Russia-Ukraine is literally no different. Leftists usually oppose war because of one of three reasons. One, the principle of pacifism, which doesn't work because these guys are literally rooting for Putin. If they are a person who opposes the war for pacifist purposes, they aren't literally going to be rooting for Putin or Zelensky or anybody else. Two, opposing imperialism. Well, Russia's literally trying to do imperialism, so no. And three, if the war is being waged against a leftist country. Now that's definitely not an issue here. So yeah, literally the only three reasons for a leftist to oppose a war cannot be applied. And if you need any more further proof that this right-wing infiltration of the left is a problem, then let me introduce you to the last phenomenon. Remember how the anti-SJWs had this weird relationship where they just had like some right-wing people just be part of the anti-SJW crowd? Well, simply put, this crowd of leftists who for some reason look and sound exactly like right-wingers also has a crowd of literal right-wingers who are part of their circles, who for some reason are treated as part of the left. Kim Iverson, Haas, Yo Pasta, Samira Khan, Slow News Day, Marie Fonseca, Chad Wilson, Primo Nutsack, Sky Daddy. These are people, like, they literally are just not on the left. Like, literally, no ifs, ands, or buts. Kim Iverson just supports Republicans, like, and she has for a while. She's openly stated that she supports Republicans. Samira Khan is literally just a freaking Muslim theocrat, and she literally tweeted, like, she or one of the other people literally tweeted point blank, like there's like, how is a leftist saying anything like that? And she's like, did I ever once claim I'm a leftist? It's like, great, so can all these, like, communists just stop pretending to take you seriously? Like, these communists literally, like they love her. It's probably because if Muslim society ever becomes a big thing, they want her as their property. Yo Pasta openly just stated that he is not a socialist by any means. Primo and Chad openly worshipped a centrist conspiracy nut. Marie Fonseca literally said that her favorite member of Congress was Justin Amash, the guy who literally voted to make sure that government workers couldn't be paid during a shutdown. The weirdest one, but not really the biggest, like, noticeable one, was Slow News Day Sleeve Poinkinen, who literally during the campaign was openly supporting an anarcho-capitalist running for the president. This dude was claiming, like, that he was the super far left guy, but he literally was just point blank saying that this anarcho-capitalist was the only person who was a good candidate for president. But obviously the worst one is Haas and the MAGA communists. They don't even, like, hide it, really. They literally don't hide the fact that they are not communists and they are fascists. Like, Jackson Hinkle literally went on Jimmy Dore's show to shit-talk a Marxist guerrilla fighter, Gustavo Petro, and praised his right-wing billionaire opponent. All the little gorilla emojis I see unironically praise anti-communist politicians, Trump, Ron Paul, and Huey Long. They all just started getting mad at Cuba for legalizing gay marriage and claimed that they were communists in name only, and Haas literally quotes fascists positively all the time. Like, he literally was talking about, like, he had a debate with, like, Dylan Burns, and then he literally was just quoting a fascist for no reason. Like, he was like, this great thinker, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, oh yeah, this guy was, like, literally like a Nazi general. He also loves Dugin, and then tries to make this, like, weird claim, like, oh, no, you see, actually, when Dugin says he's a fascist, what he actually means is he's not a fascist. And to top it all off, this group has somehow actually managed to make LaRouche'ites mainstream again. LaRouche, literally one of the most prominent examples in history of a left to right shift. Literally the only other one I can think of making a shift from the left to the hard right is Charles Coughlin, and I've already mentioned how they have relations to Charles Coughlin through their admiration of Huey Long. Now you might ask yourself this: why does this happen? Well, there are really only two reasons I can think of. One is the most obvious one. Like, let's just get this out of the way. Fame and money. With this shift, you get popular among right-wingers, ergo you get more money. According to the site Hype Auditor, 18 out of 100 of the news and politics channels are explicitly right-wing. Now you might say, that's not that big of a number. The explicitly left-of-center ones are 7. The rest of them are, like, top 10 lists that have no political biases, or are the, like, centrist news outlets, like the unbiased centrist news outlets like CNN. And 2, it's because of the cycle of this media sphere. One generation of creators sets a groundwork that the next wave of creators in that field will follow. Then that wave paves the way for the next one, and it's like a game of telephone. Let's use both of these things as examples. Skeptics. Amazing atheist makes a living bashing Christian conservatives, then starts making videos on SJWs. He doesn't have to go, oh, by the way, Christian conservatives are worse, because people should know that he already believes that. Then Armored Skeptic comes along, making a living talking about SJWs as well. He occasionally makes videos on Christian conservatives, because that's the bread and butter of his movement. Then comes Chris Raygun, who makes anti-SJW videos and aligns himself with conservatives, but still claiming to be left-wing. Then comes Bearing, who makes videos exclusively bashing SJWs and not conservatives at all, because he is one. And Progressive News. Jimmy Dore bashes Democrats a lot, then doesn't cover Republicans because, quote, "We know Republicans are worse, I'm just trying to make Democrats better." Then comes Nico House, who enters the more conspiratorial angle of the sphere, and noticeably levies critiques to figures that not even Dore would attack, at least back in the day. But it still seems like Nico is coming from a leftist angle. Then comes Ryan Knight, who begins to levy criticisms to leftist members of Congress. Nothing too bad at first, but then he becomes very vocal. Then comes Socialist MMA, still claims to be on the left and advocating for leftist reforms, but they almost exclusively attack the left. Not Democrats, the left, and never the GOP. In fact, the only time the GOP leaves their mouths is when they get praise. Then we reach Jackson Hinkle, who literally just supports the GOP while still claiming to be some sort of leftist or communist. Now, there's no, broad solution. I sadly can't solve this problem. If I could, I wouldn't just do it. I wouldn't tell you how to solve this problem. The best thing we can do is simply just make sure people can call them out and see these grifters for what they are. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you just more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.